Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this new session within the webinar series organized by APSCC. I'm Pacôme Révillon, Euroconsult CEO, very happy to be with you today. And I would first like to thank APSCC for proposing me to host this session. So today is a fireside chat. So I don't know for the fireside, but I'm pretty sure about the chat. Very happy to welcome with me to discuss Stewart Sanders, EVP Technology and O3B Empire Program Lead for SES. So I'm pretty sure most to all of you would know Stewart, but in a nutshell, Stewart, even prior to his current responsibility, has had, long is not the right word, very significant, large experience in technology in satellite-related networks, having been CTO of O3B and before its acquisition by SES, and on top of that, having occupied several positions within the SES group and before everything around technology, networks, connectivity, and so forth. So, welcome, Stewart, to this chat. I think certainly technology and connectivity are two words working together in our industry at this point in time and ecosystem. I think that for SES, it's obviously another big year, but especially big year for the mPOWER programs that you're leading with, upcoming deployment and moving closer and closer to the service stage. So maybe would like to invite you to give just any introduction word, and then maybe potentially an update on the mPOWER program, potentially to start with.
Sure. Thanks, Paco. Good to see you again, and hello to everybody at APSCC. Actually, I just realized as you said it, fireside chat, I am actually sat next to a fire, but thankfully it's not on. I think it would be a little bit hot otherwise, and still in COVID times, occasionally working from not in the office, let's put it that way. So yeah. Yes, 2022 is going to be a huge year. I've been working this program for quite a long time now, and in earnest in terms of having satellites under contract and building the ground systems, probably about 4 years. So this is going to be a very, very busy year. We're still progressing well. We expect to have the satellites launched by the middle of the year and aiming to get the system up and running by the end of the year. But as you said, I've been in the industry a very, very long time. And I was just thinking this morning that many years ago when working at Intelsat, traffic transitions from a new GEO satellite or from an old GEO satellite to a new GEO satellite were pretty run-of-the-mill looking back at it now. They're very, very organized activities, but we could transition pretty much all of the traffic within literally minutes by a lot of careful planning, because the satellite coming on looked very much like the satellite that it was replacing, just more of the same, a little bit more connectivity, a little bit more power. With O3B Empire, what we're bringing to market is completely unique to us, unique to the industry. And while we have an existing MEO system, O3B, which we tend to call O3B Current or O3B Classic internally, O3B Empire is quite a bit different in terms of total capacity, total number of beams, throughput, connectivity. I think it's important to say that O3B Current, O3B Classic is not going away. It's still a very valuable asset to us. It's still differentiated. It is the only full NGSO constellation, commercial constellation in operation, and we will still be using that. So we won't be transitioning all customers immediately, and some perhaps not at all. They may stay on Classic for some time. That will be done on a case-by-case basis according to needs. But yes, by the end of the year, we will be building up services on O3B Empire and bringing a lot of new services as well, new customers. There's recent announcements about some deals that we've been doing, and those are just a selection of the deals that we're happening. So incredibly busy, and it isn't just about the spacecraft, of course, it's about the ground systems as well, which is my focus, right from software components to the hardware terminals, gateways, and so on and so forth. Still very, very busy, but it is becoming the culmination of quite a few years of work. Very exciting.
Definitely looks like, and interesting to hear. I think the full start of service on O3B was something that like 2014, so which was kind of the first broadband and GSO constellation, and your classic, not vintage, but classic after about 7 to 8 years. So it gives an idea on how the industry has been moving, certainly. So on the program, as you mentioned, so the satellites will be up there. I know you have those programs running as well with cloud partners covering your multi-orbit services. But giving some perspective on the ground segment, yes, I think you announced, including in Asia, the deployment of gateways in Australia. And for the user terminals, just to give some perspective at what client can expect to have these two next year, or what's kind of the roadmap near term. You will see a lot about, the more parabolic to phased array antenna and so forth. So just to give an idea on what will be, what's kind of really, or what can be in the hands of customers in the next, this next year, typically.
Yes, and certainly I think if you look back to O3B, one of the lessons that we've learned, and it's unkind to say it was a lesson we learned. It was a situation that would have been difficult to avoid back then, bringing a new system to market with necessarily a lot of new equipment. The opportunity to deploy at scale, build at scale, test at scale really wasn't there on that time around, because it had never been done before. So one of the things that we've been careful to do with O3B Empire is get the terminal development up and running very early, and to get as much of that soak testing, experience, integration, however you want to look at it, done way before we ever come into service. And that's what we've been doing. And we've been working with, one of the strong themes of O3B Empowers is we want partners. We said this very strongly at the start of the program and did some mini roadshows with vendors. We don't want transactional relationships. We want partners who are going to be in it together. And thankfully, we've found that, and there are a myriad of partners involved, from platform partners such as Gilat and ST Engineering iDirect, key terminal providers such as Intellian, Comtech CGC, Viasat, unfortunately, AVL. I'm going to miss companies out, but Orbit. Really working with them to develop either new terminals based on old designs, or completely new terminals. Isotropic is another key partner, which is very much in the flat panel antenna. But if you look at the suite of antennas and terminals and gateways that we're bringing, which scale from sub 1 meter up to the gateways are the largest terminals that we'd be producing at 5.5 meter, carbon fiber 5.5 meter antennas, and various sizing through there so that we can serve different markets, mobility solutions, fixed data solutions, and a mix of flat panel antennas. All of the intent for all of them is to get them into the hands of my team, shake them down. We have a integrated lab facility in Betzdorf in Luxembourg at SES headquarters, which we built up over the last couple of years. There is an enormous antenna field. Anybody that knows Betzdorf, it is one of the biggest antenna facilities in the world. And we've taken a portion of that to build out terminals under test and really understand. And the guy that's running that, Sabawibi, who works for me, was involved in the whole deployment of O3B. So he has all of the many years of learnt experience to drive into the integration of these terminals and make sure the integration with the platforms and the other software components is as seamless as possible. So there is a huge number of different types of terminal, because we're not going after just one segment. You won't see one antenna type across the whole of the network. We can scale with a customer even within a segment, but we have the different tools for the different challenges that will come there. Largely parabolic, because physics dictates you will get a better performance out of parabolic. We don't need generally to force it into a flat panel antenna, because we have the experience to be able to work with parabolics. But in some areas, we will be using flat panel antennas, and the testing that we've done with isotropic shows that terminal, for instance, will bring some unique capabilities to the market in terms of multi-beam connectivity, simultaneous multi-beam connectivity to different orbit regimes, which is very attractive to certain government customers in particular.
So maybe one question, and looking at two particular cases. So obviously you already have a number of clients in Asia and in other parts of the world, but in Asia for O3B, for example, for either backhaul or certain other applications. So taking those clients, let's say the transition or the ability to at least use mPOWER, for example, would be seamless. So, I mean, just thinking of the onboarding, so what it takes to make the first level of use, or what it takes to use a full, let's say, the full differentiating or new proposition for O3B in terms of changing, you know, your ground segment, your software, the way you need to interact with SES to leverage a service. So just to give some perspective on that client onboarding. Maybe.
Yeah, and the individual customers will be aware of what we're planning to do with them. So I don't think anything I'm going to say here should be a big surprise. But for those customers that will remain on O3B current, O3B Classic at the moment, obviously they stay there and not a lot changes. And at some point in the future, we may move them over to O3B Empire if it makes sense to do so. But there's no particular reason that they need to move off that system if it's working today, which it is. For the customers that are moving on to O3B Empire, many of the antenna terminals can work on O3B Empire. There will be some updates, particularly because we're leveraging the Galat and STI Direct platforms on O3B Empire rather than SCPC modem configurations that have been used on Classic. That gives us the next generation terminal, so it gives us some additional benefits in terms of the flexibility of the platform, the throughput, and indeed performance under weather events at very low noise signaling performance of the modem. So those are some of the additional benefits we can bring that are not just about the satellite. So each of those customers is being worked with, and we will have a plan to where we need to come upgrade, swap out one or two components so that they can move over to Empire. And the equipment that is enabled for Empire will be backward compatible on Classic, but we don't envisage need for the customers to jump back. But it is, just that capability will be there. But that is a key part of the system rollout that we're working at the moment. And in fact, I won't name a specific customer yet, because I know that we're going to do a little bit of PR about it. But we are in the process of rolling out O3B Empire next generation terminals, an Intellian terminal set, to an existing customer on O3B Classic. And in the coming weeks, we will show what that new terminal looks like operating on Classic as a kind of proof of concept for that customer.
Okay, that's good teasing to watch PR releases in the coming weeks. So and on the flip side, so thinking, and you mentioned about it, but in terms of the key differentiators, so between the extra capacity to your ability, obviously, to control traffic, the software defined, or the partnership with cloud, what do you see as the 2-3 really key differentiators that, well, I mean, obviously you've been talking with clients in terms of their expectation, but as well in terms of SES operations and leverage through the assets. So what do you see really as the 2-3 features that are really the key differentiators, or what is changing for SES with this new assets, both GEO and GSO,
Yeah, so the obvious one is the scale. Even though we're bringing initially 6 satellites, which under current contract will grow to 11 satellites with O3B Empire. The total system capacity, number of beams, throughput, spectrum is way more than we're using on the current system. And it will, really mean that the total system capability available to the customers is huge. But what does an individual customer care about the total system capability? They care about what we can deliver to them, and that flexibility 100% is available to them. We can scale from low tens of megabits up to multiple gigabits, and we can keep growing that as the constellation grows. And therefore we can grow with a customer, we can target what that customer needs today, and opens up new business cases. Flexibility within the connectivity is a big differentiator compared to the current O3B system. So on the current system, the user beams have to be, they're effectively hardwired back to a gateway beam. And in some rare cases, you can go beam to beam, but that's it's not a normal connection. And so all of that data, all of the connectivity has to go from a user beam to one of the existing gateway beams. On O3B Empire, we don't have that constraint. Any endpoint can connect to any other endpoint within the field of view of the satellite. It can go to one of our gateways, it can go to another gateway, customer gateway, and at the same time, multiple connections can be created. So particularly around the concept of customer gateway, and the irony is as we create this capability, we can have many more gateways, but at the end of the day, a gateway becomes another terminal. Really, the defining point for a gateway is that it's sitting on terrestrial connectivity to the outside world. That's what you're trying to create, is that connection through, or it's a point to get to that outside world. But if a customer wants to land data back in their own country on the current system, they can't do that in an easy way. They have to go back to our gateway, which may be out of country. With O3B Empire, they can have their own gateway in country and land all of the data in country, and they can have local content. There are other reasons why they might want to bring that data in. And for some of the government customers that we're working with, it means they can have a completely virtual network, and we can also give them control of that network through some proprietary secure APIs only for government customers. We don't envisage doing this for the commercial customers, but they can have secure control of the beam pointing, for instance, to manage their own virtual secure network within the overall O3B Empire system, and the only touch point really is the satellite. So there's a lot of layers of capability there. And one of the really interesting things is then we were talking with the team in depth yesterday that even though we're very much targeted on the deliveries for start of service, we know that the system development, and particularly around the ground system development, will continue for some time after that. Partly because there's only so much we can do in a given time, but also because we're still interacting with customers, understanding new business cases, trying to figure out from a product point of view, does it make sense to develop that? And we can work with customers so that the system will keep developing. It's not going to be like a geo where what you get on day one is pretty much what you're going to get 10 years down the road. This system will keep growing and developing capability.
Yeah, I think it, I think I may have one point on technology after, but okay, so yeah, I guess this would give you more flexibility. Obviously, we talk defense, but also management of customer expectation and or regulatory obligations for whatever country in the world working with the system. And if I get it right, with that flexibility and ability to change, refocus capacity, etc., it would, to a certain extent, impact customer relationship or the ability to scale or modify contracts over time, as opposed to fixed volume, fixed 5-year, whatever duration, to be able to accommodate potential increase without, for SES, having the need to lock capacity for whatever years until that demand exists, maybe as well.
Yeah.
Which is side benefits. Okay. I think, and as you mentioned about, continuous development and moving forward. Are there one or two technologies areas, and there's a lot happening in our industry, or let's say in the ICT ecosystem at large, but are there one or two technology fields that you would find particularly interesting or looking a bit ahead that shall create leverage, even if it needs to mature? I mean, if it's really satellite specific, I know there's a lot of development around an increasing software-defined ground segment for everything from user to the other terminals on top of the satellite part of the equation. But it can be also in the ICT and cloud space where you're working. So we don't have time, we don't have half a day to discuss about it, but if there are one or two areas where you see more coming or that could create leverage, what would that be?
I think the tendency when these kind of questions come up in these forums is to talk about flat panel antenna development, and we've talked about that many times, and it is part of the spectrum of what we will do, but it's a much discussed one. The thing that really excites me is exactly what you're saying, is the fact that it's the huge component of software that these systems have. And while strictly speaking, we shouldn't describe the satellites as software defined because they're still based on hardware, the chipsets, there is an enormous amount of flexibility in those chipsets, and the speeds with which they're running mean that they're sampling directed RF, which you get rid of a lot of hardware that would previously been required, which, hardware is weight, is cost, is mass, is cost, is cost, is cost. It has an effect on the overall business case. So the fact that the satellites come to market with this huge amount of capability, but are actually quite small, to get to see them up close just before Christmas, I was, really impressed. I've never seen anything like it before. We've taken some customers through. They are, I think somebody said it the other day, they're not your father's Oldsmobile, I think is the old saying. They really are next generation. But when you couple that with the ground systems and the software, the fact that it's software across the board, almost all of the components are software based, even the terminals is a big software component. It means that you can integrate more and more and more. And at some point you have a fully integrated software based system, which means you leverage existing standards for terrestrial networks, such as things as ONAP, where we can then start utilizing existing standards to launch services across hardware and systems that previously that hasn't happened. Why is it O3B was able to get MEF compliance, Metro Ethernet Forum compliance? Because of the lower latency, because of the performance. But when you start leveraging that for some of the services that we're providing, it really opens up a new world that, I don't see us becoming commoditized, because we can still bring a lot of differentiation in space, but we will be able to fit into the broader world and its infrastructure in a way that hasn't happened before. And that's exactly why cloud partners such as Microsoft are really interested in, working with us, because they see it brings something they don't have, which is to extend their existing terrestrial-based networks through satellite and give that experience at the edge of the network, which customers at the core of the cloud network have been the only ones to get to date. So that's why I say the ability to keep evolving the system and provide new services will keep growing, because the software will keep growing. And we talk about ARC, which is a proprietary software that we're developing with partner Kithera, as being the brains of the system, but it is just one component, and it will interface with many of the other key components, such as the platform and some of the software that's interfacing with the network and business side of the business as well. So more and more automation, I think, is going to be the key interesting thing as we go forward.
And one question about that. So obviously their integration with the terrestrial networks, when I look at the satellite or space industry solutions, either space or ground, obviously it might move more or less towards certain standards, but I assume as of today, several of the vendors, either for a geo or other solutions, may have like software-defined approaches for the satellite assets and moving forward ground segment. Some of that may still be proprietary. So I assume you need also to look at a software integrator or layer to be able to work with all the different assets you shall manage in the coming years, because, well, several assets might be partly software defined, but from different vendors, and maybe some of that will not be directly interoperable, let's call it that way, or leverage. So I assume there is a need for development in a layer so you can leverage all and make all of the assets work together.
Yeah, and you're certainly pointing at one of the challenges. So one of the keys to making that as easy as possible is to use open standard interfaces, which, you know, that is possible. But even then, you really have to then look at the data sets, the data models that are going to be working through those standards and make sure that they're appropriate. And it is ironically and you know, frankly, wasn't something we anticipated. One of the biggest challenges has been taking those the interface is one thing, but having the data set concepts on one side from a terrestrial environment and mapping them to a satellite environment is not easy, because it's a slightly different language, and it's taken a lot of very smart people to work through that. But the interesting thing is, in talking with some of our more developed customers, let's say, who also think about these things, they all think we're on the right track in doing what we're doing, and you know, even wanting to leverage some of the work we're doing. We're lucky enough and big enough that we can take direct ownership of some of that work. We certainly work with partners as well, but our preference is to work on certain key components directly in-house. And that means we create control. It isn't about having proprietary ownership so much. It's more about control of destiny and making sure that goes in the direction that we need.
Thanks. That may be as technical as we can go. Either I can go, we can go with our audience. But if I take a step back, so well, it's clearly a brand new asset, and it's a very you know, key investment and a long-standing program for SES. One big topic we see now in the ecosystem is start to be more and more about the sustainability aspect in space, different activities taking place in space, number of constellations. So obviously, depending on your orbit, asset situation might be somewhat different. But well, you know, outside of the news or risk of collisions or orbits, certain of them coming closer to maybe human space flight or space activities, etc. So how do you see, you know, situation for in the industry or as program manager when thinking of this and upcoming program, the look at those sustainability issues, and where you see that work or even extra work will be needed on that front?
Yeah, this is it's almost like the elephant in the room with the growth of, in particular, non-geo. And I think I've spoken on these forums before that I was the founding chairman of something called the Space Data Association more than 10 years ago, which was put together as a not-for-profit entity with initially three of the operators, SES, Intelsat, and Inmarsat, and drawing in other operators as we grew the concept to try and do exactly that, to manage in a responsible way the space environment, because it's an asset that, you know, if we mess it up, it's going to be very difficult to get it back. And without that asset, we don't get to do what we do. We don't get to serve our customers. So it is really important that we behave in a responsible way. And you know, geo was the most densely populated arc, but geo, there's a lot of space at geo. Generally, things are moving in the same direction. I'm lucky that most of what I'm doing now is at MEO, which is a very quiet orbit, but you know, the proliferation of objects at LEO is of concern, and it is not an easy thing to solve, because first of all, you need to accurately understand where the objects that you control are compared to other objects. That's one of the reasons the Space Data Association was created, that no two companies necessarily have the same level of accuracy of their own measurements or the same measurement framework. And therefore, they may be talking apples and oranges when they connect data and compare data. And the Space Data Association was put together exactly to solve that problem. So if you're operating satellites and I'm operating satellites, we both publish our own orbit data into the Space Data Association servers in a secure way. So I can't see what you're publishing and you can't see what I'm publishing, but the system is smart enough to then take your format, my format, convert it to a common format, and bring in lots of other data sets that measure the same thing, some of which are in the public domain, and use as much data as possible to figure out the best information to make that comparison. And if one of your objects comes too close to one of my objects, we both will be told that. And then it's between us to make sure that we don't have a collision. If one of those objects is debris, I will be told I'm coming close to debris and try and do something about it. That seems to be the best way, but I don't know whether all of these new LEO operators are doing the responsible thing. And I know a few years ago, they definitely weren't. So if they're not, there are, looking at as much data as possible, crunching that data to produce the best estimates of where you are and behaving in a responsible way is the best way. Space is hard. I mean, the recent Starlink event just within the last week, it's not something, clearly not something that they anticipated. Space is difficult, and we cannot afford to have the kind of thing that people are worried about, which is a mass propagating set of collisions at LEO. It'll just be a disaster. We have to get control of this.
Sounds good. But on the positive side, tentatively, industry would be moving, and the ability to collect and treat data is certainly increasing exponentially, hopefully as fast as the issue might be. So I think we're getting close to the end of the time we had today. So maybe Stewart, on your side, I think we already talked about the program or milestone for this year. But if you have one or two takeaways or conclusion points on your side that you would like to stress, would be happy to hear them.
Well, you said at the start, this is a key year for us. It's really busy, and the most exciting thing is the fact that we are bringing customers to the system, and we will be doing more and more of that. It's certainly a key part of what I've been doing the last 3 or 4 years, as well as building the system, is getting out there, talking in forums like this, meeting customers, developing solutions. So, case in point, just within the last week or so, really great to see a customer that we've been working with for 20 years now, Marlink, has the faith to continue to put its faith in with us. Previously worked at Geo, currently on O3B, but they've signed up to a multi-year deal on O3B Empire. And that's really significant. It's a firm commitment, and they're going to use it across the many, many segments that they're working on, fixed data, enterprise, non-cruise, maritime, so on and so forth. That one's great. That's somebody we've worked with before, and we be really disappointed and if we hadn't got them there, but it's great to see that faith. And then the other one that just came out yesterday is Reliance Geo, and the strategic joint venture that we're doing with them, which is it's really going to be game changing. It's going to give us an opportunity to work with a partner in country, subject to regulatory approval, but we wouldn't be pursuing this if we didn't think that was something that can be closed. But it'll mean that we can leverage SES's scale and infrastructure to bring new connectivity, 4G, 5G networks to this really well-established and very important partner in India. And for anybody that works in the industry knows there are certain markets which everybody wants to try and support. And having got this done and out there, it's just, it really brings home what we're bringing to market, that it is differentiated, it is having traction with some very key customers, and there are going to be more to come. But that one in particular, I think, and you know, having been involved in that work to get this to where it was, it's great, and that brings home the excitement to me and really brings focus about what we're going to be bringing to market later this year. And I think we've been consistent on what we're trying to do in the marketplace rather than having a business case that morphs as we struggle. We've been consistent, and to see now traction with key customers such as Marlink and Reliance Jio is great, and I'm really looking forward to this year.
Yeah, and actually, congrats on the just announced agreements. I think in the last couple of weeks, including this week with Jio, and I take the clear interest of large corporate groups and telecom companies for a satellite-based solution as a sign of the attractiveness and the role it can play in the telecom ecosystem at large. So definitely interesting time for and sign for the entire industry, and certainly a great transaction for SES. So I think we're getting really to the end of it. So it will be my duty to thank you, Stewart, for sharing your views today. To thank APSCC for inviting me again and for organizing this fireside chat. So yeah, I think this, APSCC will welcome questions. This can be answered either live or afterwards in writing, and otherwise looking forward to next webinar series already from APSCC. And Stewart, looking forward to see you anytime soon in person on top of virtual, either in Asia, Europe, US, or any other place. Satellites fly, but hopefully people can fly again at least also in an easier manner this year. Thank you very much, Stewart. Take care, as we say, and thanks to everyone listening.
Thanks, Paco. It's great to catch up. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.